Hosted by you/Thrower0727. I'm finally at a point where I can't stand this anymore. I, 32M, have been in love with my former sister-in-law, 27F, for a very long time, maybe a couple of years now, and I'm not sure if I should just let it go or attempt to pursue something with her. I met my ex-wife, her sister, when I was 23 years old. The relationship developed very quickly, and by 26, I had my son and daughter and had gotten married. However, within months of being married, my ex-wife had an affair. Worse than that, the man she cheated with got her into heroin. When I confronted her about this, she said she would get help but instead left during the night. I haven't heard from her in 4 years, and the last I heard, she's still with that man, and they're homeless in Las Vegas. I'm not sure if that's true, but since I've been focused on holding things together for the kids, I haven't had the time to chase her down, nor do I want to after what she pulled. I ended up getting a divorce in absentia. I've managed to maintain a very positive relationship with my in-laws despite everything. Every other weekend, my kids stay over with their grandparents on that side, and they pretty much still treat me like a son. I still go to Christmas parties and am reasonably well liked by the family. Nobody talks about my ex anymore, mainly to avoid upsetting the kids. My oldest, my son, has been very hurt by his mother's absence. He's 9 now, and I had to get therapy for him after he told me he wished his mother was dead. She had become verbally abusive toward the end, which was when he was around 5 or 6. Anyway, in the year following my ex leaving, her sister and her boyfriend started coming around a lot to see the kids. They knew I worked a lot and would babysit, calling it practice since they wanted children of their own. My kids loved them and were spoiled by them, which I didn't mind because we all needed a little positivity. They got married and were very much in love. Tragically, her husband passed away in a workplace accident shortly after their daughter was born. It's been extremely rough and painful for everyone involved, as one can imagine. Following my sister-in-law's example, I began taking her daughter at times to give her space when things got too hard to deal with or she needed some alone time. She's been in grief counseling for a few years, but she still wears her wedding ring and has told me she can't imagine dating again. We often talk about her late husband, and while she's in a better place now, she's still very much in love with him. I can't imagine the depth of that pain. Over the last 2 years, we've become more constant figures in each other's lives. My kids adore their aunt, and I have her over for dinner a couple of times a week. My daughter and her daughter have grown close and love being around each other, so they have sleepovers. By this point, I've moved on from my ex, but the idea of dating, potentially bringing someone dangerous into my kids' lives, like their mother, has kept me out of the dating scene. I don't know when it happened, but I slowly started developing feelings for my sister-in-law. She's a wonderful mom, especially given all she's been through. She's one of the sweetest people I know, and her sense of humor always leaves me laughing and happy. Then I started realizing I was physically attracted to her. I've always felt a little guilty about it because her late husband was a good friend, and since she's obviously still grieving, I've kept my feelings to myself. Since COVID started, we've been spending even more time together because social distancing has limited our contact with others. Nothing romantic has ever been discussed, and I try not to flirt. But last week, it was very late after the kids went to bed. I made us a few drinks, not enough to get drunk, and she decided to spend the night, so I took the couch. I woke up to breakfast the next morning, and the 4 of us felt like the family I've always wanted. She even kissed my forehead, which isn't something she normally does. I didn't say anything, but after she left, I found my son quietly playing with his toys in his room. He looked upset, so I asked him if he was all right. He told me, point blank, in the way only a kid can, that he wishes his aunt was his mother. I sat down with him and asked him why he felt that way. He gave me a list of reasons. She's kind to him, she never yells, and he loves seeing her at his grandparents' house. He mentioned that she draws pictures with him, which I didn't even know they did. By the end of it, my heart, already softening toward this woman, melted even more. When I dropped the kids off at their grandparents' house, I tried to subtly gauge their opinion by making a joke about how their daughter and I sometimes act like a married couple. They didn't laugh and seemed a bit standoffish. They were friendly but distant, which made me wonder if they know something or if they disapprove. It's becoming harder for me to ignore these feelings or pretend they're not there. I'm in love with her. Either I've got to let go of these feelings and find a way to move on, or I have to figure out how to navigate this situation and tell her how I feel. If anyone has any insight on how to approach a widow, especially one who was married to a friend, with this kind of intention, I could really use your help. Update 2 days later. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who gave me advice on how to proceed, as well as ideas and things I could say to my former sister-in-law. Here's what I ended up doing. Shortly after making the first post, I remembered that my children were spending Sunday night at their grandparents' house, and typically when they do this, my niece, sister-in-law's daughter, joins them. I allow these bi-weekly visits because I think it's important for them to maintain a healthy relationship with their mother's parents. My sister-in-law lets her daughter go because she enjoys playing with my daughter. Well, I realized we'd both have a free night. Normally, I'd just game or hit the gym for an extra session, but I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to see her without the kids around. So, I sent her a text saying, "Hey, kids are out this Sunday. Was thinking you might want to get dinner." It was at a fairly upscale place that reopened 2 months or so ago for outdoor dining. I never ask her out to dinner, and we're almost never alone together or without a child in the other room. She says she'd love to, and then my panic set in because now I had to actually act on my feelings. I asked her if she'd prefer meeting at my place and taking one car or meeting at the restaurant. She said she'd come by my place first. I was a bit more cleaned up than normal, dressed up, but not overly so. She shows up, and my God, she's in a very nice evening dress, with makeup, not something she normally wears. She really looked stunning. I must have been slack-jawed for a second. I had to be, lol. We made a little small talk, complimented each other on how we looked, but I still didn't have the nerve to bring up my feelings, and she wasn't pushing the issue. Dinner was really wonderful. They had a live jazz group playing. I'm definitely coming back to this place. She told me this was the first time she'd had an adult social outing that didn't involve her daughter in a few years. I mentioned that it had been about as long for me. We laughed, joked, talked, and shared a little casual touching here and there. I still couldn't find my nerve, though. I was afraid of ruining the moment, so I just submitted to having fun. But as we were leaving, my mind snapped, and I just thought, screw it. When we stood to go back to the car, I gave her my arm, and we walked back arm in arm. No awkwardness, nobody mentioning it. I opened her door for her, planning to drive her back to her car. As I opened the door, she stopped me. Looking sort of nervous, she outright told me to stop and that she wanted to kiss me. There was no drinking at dinner, so this was all her. I pulled her in, and we kissed. I can barely describe how wonderful it felt to finally touch her. The kissing went on outside the restaurant, with her leaned against my car, for at least half an hour. When we finally broke apart, we shared a few more dreamy looks before getting in the car and driving back to my place. She held my hand as I drove. I don't think I've ever been happier. I confessed to her that I'd started having feelings for her a long time ago, but because of the terrible things we'd gone through, I didn't want to scare her away. She told me she'd carried a torch for me for about 6 months. Around that time, I'd gone on a couple of Tinder dates, and since we were just friends, I described to her what a mess those dates were. She said she'd started feeling intensely jealous and angry that I was seeing other girls. That's when it clicked for her that she'd somehow developed feelings for me. It turns out I didn't approach her because of her late husband, and she didn't approach me because she was afraid I'd see too much of her sister, my ex-wife, in her and start to resent her for it. After we got back to my place, I invited her in. We decided to fight off the desire to jump straight into bed and just sat on the couch, snuggling and talking about what we'd need to do to make this a working relationship. There were some really teary moments. We talked about her late husband a little and where she felt she was in the grief process. I told her I didn't want to rush her and that I'd wait as long as she needed me to. She said she felt like she was in a place where she could love again and that she was long past feeling guilty for having feelings for me, which was something she had struggled with. She then brought up her sister and the obvious questions a few people had asked in the comments. What would we do if my ex ever decided to show her face around here again or try to get back into my kids' lives? What if she came back reformed and apologetic? Would I take her back? I told her that was a hard no. I've forgiven her for cheating on me, but I will never forgive her for what she did to my son. He was such a sunny, happy boy before his mother started cheating, using, and lashing out at him. He's doing better now, but for a long while, his behavior and negativity were really troubling for someone so young. She was concerned about how he might react to us because, unlike our respective daughters, he's old enough to understand everything. I told her not to tell him yet, as it might embarrass him, but not too long ago, he told me he wished his aunt was his mom instead. We said we'd take it slow and not rush things, but the kissing started again, and since we were in private this time, we gave up the fight to stay out of the bedroom. I'd had fantasies throughout the duration of my feelings for her, and getting to stroke her face in the morning was one I finally got to live out. Moving forward, we're going to establish date nights and work on building on our already strong foundation. When we inevitably tell our families that we're a couple, we're going to do it together. But that's where I'm at, that's my update. If this subreddit allows, maybe I'll do another post to share how the parents, in-laws, and kids take the news. 2 years of wishing she was mine, and now she is. Better not mess this up. Second update 1 week later. Note, I forgot to add that I am referring to my ex-wife as Jessica and my sister-in-law, who I had been calling Sil, to Sylvia because it's funny. Well, we've told everyone, and for the most part, it's gone over fairly well. When our respective kids were with my in-laws, Sylvia and I went to see my parents. They've met her a handful of times, but they don't really know her too well since my in-laws and my family rarely attended mutual functions. They at least recognized who she was. My dad isn't a particularly sentimental person, so I have no idea what he thinks about it, but my mother is on board. She did ask, does Jess know? And we told her that I haven't even spoken with her in 4 years and Sylvia hasn't heard from her in 2. We said we'd cross that bridge when we got to it. Other than that, my folks just seemed happy for me. Yesterday, we attended a small family gathering for Labor Day at my in-laws. We knew the reception here would be a little chillier since they're all also related to my ex-wife. My parents did us the favor of taking the kids to the zoo for the afternoon, and for ice cream too. We arrived at the party together, and of course, everybody was wondering where the kids were. It felt like a million things were telling me not to do this, but I took her by the hand, and we both explained the kids were not there because we intended on telling everyone that we are now a couple. This wasn't a huge crowd, maybe 8 people, but it really felt like I announced it to a stadium. I don't know how we expected it to go, but several of her aunts were very pleased with this. We got some hugs. At first, nobody even mentioned my ex-wife. They were just happy because they had all settled on Sylvia just never dating again. It was only my mother-in-law who caused any issues. She told the party that she knew we were an item because I was always giving Sylvia puppy dog eyes and that Sylvia talked about me nonstop. She asked how long we had been dating in secret, and I told her only a week. She scoffed and told me that she didn't think starting a relationship off by lying was a smart move. She then accused, albeit jokingly to the guests, that Sylvia and I had vanished at a pool party in June to smooch. Her mother and father asked to talk with us after the party and asked us just how serious things were, and like my parents, whether my ex-wife knew or not. When I said no and that her opinion shouldn't matter given she abandoned her family 4 years ago, they said they would be more comfortable with everything if I told Jessica that I am now dating her sister. They are both intensely afraid that my ex will return sober and renewed, make an attempt to make amends, discover that I am now in love with her younger sister, and relapse. It sounded to me as if they knew something I didn't, and as it turns out, Jess has been calling and talking to them for a year now, and they just haven't told me. I was upset they kept this from me. Sylvia was very upset too because not once after her husband's death has Jess ever tried to call her. They showed me her Facebook profile, the one she blocked me from, and there she is looking pretty normal, not like the burned out husk I remember. I have to admit that seeing her not looking like the junkie she became when she left made me feel a little better, and Sylvia too. Her parents kept their contact with her a secret because she is ashamed of what she's done and feels that she deserves to lose her kids and couldn't face them after all that happened. Sylvia's parents gave me her phone number and asked that I please call her and speak with her. I told them that my feelings for Sylvia are real, and there is no chance I reconcile with Jess. My father-in-law seemed to nod in approval, but my mother-in-law honestly looked like she was hoping we'd fix things. After we left, I talked to Sylvia about it, and though we had discussed a circumstance where Jess returns before, we decided to revisit the conversation in light of these new revelations. I told Sylvia that I am in love with her, my whole heart is hers, and that my feelings of love for her are something deeper and stronger than anything I ever felt for my ex-wife. She ended up crying from the stress of the situation, anger with her parents for keeping secrets, and anger with her sister for not calling her or offering condolences after her husband's death. She then admitted that she is afraid I might leave her if her sister returns, and I assured her this would never happen. It took some long hugs and a lot of kisses to smooth over the situation, but by the time we went to pick up the kids, we were holding hands again and feeling more connected than ever. She's been spending the night at my place pretty frequently since we've been together. So the kids don't see anything, I've been setting my alarm for 5 a.m., getting up, and moving to the couch. Well, the morning after, we decided to tell the little ones what is going on. Our daughters seemed very happy, but they are too young to really grasp what's actually taking place, all they know is they can play together more. I did take my son aside, just me and him, and asked him if he was okay with this and what he thought about it. He asked if we'd all be living together, and I told him maybe someday. He asked if this made his aunt his stepmom now, and I said he's free to call her what he's comfortable with, and I will respect it, and she would too, because we both love him. He then asked me a lot of questions about his own mother, things he had never asked me before, and I answered pretty much everything he wanted to know. I toned some of my answers down a bit. He's learned a little about the dangers of illicit substances from school programs, and I was finally honest to that degree when I told him his mom had a problem and made some bad choices. He asked me why his mother didn't love him, and that broke my heart. I assured him the best I could that his mother did love him, she had just made a lot of terrible mistakes, and that sometimes adults just don't do the right thing when they should. He asked me if I still loved her. I told him that I hoped she would get better and that I don't want her to be sick anymore, but that she hurt me and him so badly that I couldn't love her like I did before. I'm not sure he got all of that, but I tried explaining it to him the best I could. All that aside, he has been so much happier and less withdrawn since Sylvia has been with us, and he's always going out of his way to do all the typical kid stuff to impress her that I did with my own mom. At the end of the day, I still have that phone call with the ex to dread. But, having Sylvia with me, being able to kiss her and hold her at night, really put some joy back into me that's been gone for a very long time. I don't think I even knew how unhappy I'd been all these years until I realized how happy she made me feel. We've been doing all the happy, young lover stuff. She's been leaving me love letters in my work lunchbox, even little poems, and I had flowers sent to her workplace. She mentioned she had told me that a few of the ladies at work had been trying to get her to ask me out for several months, so I figured the flowers would both make her happy and be a firm thank you wink to the office girls lol. Thank you to everyone who commented or sent me messages on the first and second posts. They really made my day and helped me keep my cool to confess to her. Feel free to ask me anything, but I think this just about does it for my updates. Third update 7 weeks later. What you're about to read is a comment I wrote last week. I've just copied and pasted it, as it's pretty much good enough to be a post. It details how the phone call with my ex-wife went and provides a little more information. I did talk to her back in September. I keep meaning to write an update, but life got pretty hectic. I actually wrote a 10-paragraph update about a month ago, but my laptop crashed, and I lost it, which discouraged me. The ex-wife is in a much better place and is in recovery, 8 months clean at this point. She finally told me the details of the affair, how things happened, and how she got into the illicit substances. It's not stuff I really wanted to hear, but she's trying to get her life together. As much as I dislike the things she's done to me and the kids, I want her to get healthy. I shouldn't, but I still worry about her sometimes. Anyway, I got around to telling her about Sylvia and me, and she was dumbfounded. When I first met my ex, she was 19 and Sylvia was 14. In her mind, She always viewed Sylvia as a kid in relation to me, which, to be fair, makes sense. I used to refer to Sylvia as her kid sister. However, when she remembered that her sister is a fully grown adult who had been married and had a child, her hints that I was being a creep stopped. She did ask if I had feelings for Sylvia while I was married, and I denied it. We talked about the kids, and she was really regretful, crying throughout the conversation. She said she has no idea how she'd be able to face them again. I wanted to say something reassuring, but I didn't want to give her the impression that I want her in their lives. Cordial, even friendly, sure, but I'm not going to be stupid about it. She and Sylvia talked for a while too. I didn't eavesdrop intentionally, but from the bits I heard and what I was told, they talked about Sylvia's husband. It turns out my ex had gotten arrested for breaking and entering that week and spent it in jail. She didn't even know he had passed until a couple of weeks after the funeral, and by that point, she felt saying anything would make things worse. Things went as well as could be expected. Sylvia, the 3 kids, and I have been spending almost every day together, and I haven't been this happy in years. My son and daughter love all the motherly attention they've been getting, and I'm really enjoying getting to know my little niece better. Life's good. Busy, but it's good. Thanks for asking. I might just copy and paste this as my update lol. Alright, that was my comment update, and nothing has really changed in the week since I wrote it. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer what I can when I can, but during this season my workload increases dramatically, and I don't have as much time to be on here as I did when I first posted. I'm so glad I got up the nerve to try with her. I love her so much. I've been so long without a romantic partner that I forgot what being in love or feeling loved felt like. Now that I remember, it's shocking to me how I didn't realize how alone and miserable I really was. I mean, for Christ's sake, we played Scrabble last night, and for some reason, it made me ridiculously happy lol. 4th update 1 year later. It has been nearly a year since my former sister-in-law, Sylvia, and I decided to start dating. Now, a year later, we are living together, and I couldn't be happier. We're currently in the market for a new home. Our children are really benefiting from having 2 parents around to care for them. Our daughters have begun to call each other sisters, and my son is accepted in the same way. They're basically just normal siblings. It's interesting with my son, when he's talking to his friends or teacher, he refers to Sylvia as his mom, but when calling her or talking to her, he still calls her auntie. Our daughters do the same with me, calling me uncle. It confuses some people we meet, but it's always an interesting story to tell. We haven't had much contact with my ex-wife since my last post, though from what we hear, she's doing much better. She has a halfway decent job, a boyfriend, and is staying clean. I don't like to think about her being reintroduced into my children's lives, but if she continues to be a clean and well-rounded person, it will make it much harder for me to deny her visitation should she seek it. Not just from a legal standpoint, but from a moral one as well. Neither Sylvia nor I look forward to that day, but those worries seem far off. Her parents have stopped prodding into our business and haven't tried to force the ex back into our lives as we feared. Our kids spend weekends with them now, as my 2 were already doing that beforehand. Sylvia and I get to spend Friday night and most of Saturday going on dates and having some alone time. Our mutual friends were all pretty surprised by this and have been very supportive. They try to be polite and not mention my ex-wife, but every so often, she does come up. Mostly, everyone is just happy that we've found happiness together. One side of the family that I failed to mention in all of this was the family of Sylvia's late husband. As you might expect, her daughter still sees them regularly, and they are very happy and accepting of our relationship. His father even told me point blank that he was glad it was me because he thought he would hate his daughter-in-law bringing some strange man into his granddaughter's life. We haven't had many gatherings, of course, because of COVID, but the few get-togethers we've had have included them and will always include them. Speaking of her late husband, Sylvia and I have talked quite a bit about our feelings. She even had me come along to one of her therapy sessions because, despite everything going so well and the immense, wonderful love we have for each other, his memory and presence will always be a part of our lives. She decided on her own that, out of respect for me, she had to take her wedding band off, something that caused a lot of sadness, as you can imagine. I told her that she didn't need to do this, and if we were to get married, she's got 2 hands. After I said this, she began to wear it on a necklace instead. She now wears an engagement ring. I don't have a crazy story about how the engagement went down. I didn't spring it on her in some elaborate public spectacle, but there were tears, hugs, and kisses. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you all so much for the positive words of encouragement.